Next, we're going to be looking at and setting up the different drawing and document organization tools that we have at our disposal within the program. We're also going to be looking at how they interact with each other. So we're going to go to Tools and Organization. You're going to notice that this looks a lot like the navigation palette. It's all the same information. It's laid out in very much the same way. It just allows you direct access to editing those things and direct access as to what they are. So classes is what we're going to start with. Classes you can think of like pencils. They help us assign graphic attributes and control visibility within the program. They are also really good for allowing us to choose visibility options. So, for example, if I want to be drawing the theater architecture within my drafting, I'm going to pick up my theater architecture pencil. In this case, my theater architecture class. If I'm going to be drawing lighting objects, I want to pick up my lighting pencil. If I'm going to be drawing masking or scenery, I want to pick up either the masking or the scenery pencil. So Vectorworks by default will establish two classes for you, Dimension 1 and None. What is best practice is that no object should be created without having a class assigned to it. So best practice is as you're drafting, you're going through and you're swapping your active class for the one that you are going to be drawing with, for the thing that you were trying to create. You can always edit it after a fact. That's not a problem at all. But it's a good thing to start getting into a rhythm with. So we're going to start by creating some new classes. We're going to hit New. We're going to say Create a new class. And now the way Vectorworks structures classes is that you can have up to 3 separate dashes, and the dashes will each create a subfolder. It's basically a subclass grouping of other classes. So you have another organization potential within this, and that's actually what we're going to take advantage of here. So we're going to start by typing drafting, hit dash, pens, dash, and now we're going to name our first class. So we're going to start by naming it Thin. You want to select Edit Properties After Creation, which is going to allow us to edit those attributes. We're going to say OK. So now we get a new set of menu options. So we have graphic attributes, everything that you would find in the attributes palette. Textures used with 3D stuff, description tags, and visibilities. We're going to focus on graphic attributes. So you're going to click the box that says Use at Creation. What that means is that from the moment you draw a new object, polyline, line, whatever, in a class, it's going to automatically start applying these fill and pen qualities that you set to it. So everything will start looking the same right off the bat. You don't have to edit each individual option. Attributes, you can just assign it a class and it'll take on the properties of that class graphically. So in this case, we want solid white as our fill, solid black as our pen, and we want to set our line thickness to 0.05. And we're going to hit OK. So now you can see that we have a class of drafting, subclass of drafting with a subclass of pens, and ultimately a class of thin. We're going to keep working within this subgrouping, and we're going to make another one. So we're going to say New. And you can see that it automatically prompted those 2 folders, drop-down menus worth of classes, so we can just start typing in our new one. We're going to say Thin dash. Say OK. Use that creation again. Solid fill and white color. But our pen, we want to go ahead and change up. So you're going to click where it says Style and go to Line Type. And Vectorworks is automatically going to bring in this ISO 02 dash line. That's Vectorworks' default dash line. You can create other ones, and if there are other ones in your folder, in your file, basically this drop-down menu ties straight to your resource browser, and you can get to them that way. In this case, dash line, 0.05 thickness again, and we're going to say OK. Create another new. We're going to call this medium. Use that creation solid 0.25. Another new class. And we're going to call this medium dash. And we're going to change our line type to dashed and hit OK. And now you'll notice that we forgot to click the box use as creation. You can access it through this column at any time. You don't have to go into the full edit feature. So we're just going to go ahead and check that box after the fact. We're going to say new. And we're going to create one called heavy. Use a creation, solid, and a 0.5 line. We're going to say new, and we're going to call this extra heavy. Use a creation and a 0.7 line thickness. Say OK. So this is the process that you'd go through in order to create new classes. As you can tell, it has a little bit of tediousness to it. So there's another option. If you have a file that already has some classes that you want to use again, you can actually import them, which is what we're going to do. So you should download the CAD resources of Vectorworks file if you haven't already. But within your project 4 file, we're going to say new. And instead of create new class, we're going to click where it says import classes. You're most likely going to have to choose. It's going to be set to something like this file. So what you'll do is then you'll hit choose right next to it and navigate to where you've saved that CAD resources file and hit OK. And it's going to populate with a list of class names now. Make sure the box is clicked for show only classes that are not in the current document. What that means is that you're only going to be looking at and bringing in classes that you have not spent time creating yet. So with the first one selected in blue, scroll all the way down to the bottom, hold Shift, and click where it says section style on the last class that you see. So now you've selected all of them. I'm going to deselect edit properties after creation because I just want to bring these in as is. And we're going to say OK. Now you've ended up with a whole bunch more classes in there. This is very typical with drafting. It's normal to have a whole bunch of classes, especially important in that case to keep everything nice and organized and clean and make sure that you're going through and not bringing in a whole bunch of stray classes or things like that from other files. So we're in really good shape. So we're going to just say OK and save all those changes. Next, we're going to start drawing some objects in design layers. So if you haven't already, select your title block, hit delete. And we're going to change this layer scale back into 1/2 inch scale. So here we now are in 1/2 inch. So we want to start drawing using some of these new classes that we've brought in and made. The key for this is you want to set your default attributes now to take on what's called class style. So the moment you have a class selected, it's going to automatically populate this attributes palette with those classes details. So we're going to select where it says solid on fill, and you'll actually see right up here at the top, there's something called class style. You're going to click that. It's just going to change its look ever so slightly. Under fill, if you click on the color, this is where you can select any color in the rainbow. You'll have ones from Active Documents, you'll have classic Vectorworks colors and standard Vectorworks colors available to you. You can also click up here where it says Color Palette Manager, and you get access to different paint colors, Pantone, and then there's also some gel ones that I have selected because of what I do. Say OK. I'm going to click where it says Solid Fill. I'm going to do Color by Class. Opacity. We also want to click on these three dots next to it and use Class Fill Opacity. And we're going to link our pen opacity as well, so they take on the same properties of each other. Pen, class style, and color by class. And then line thickness also has a class thickness selection. So you can see that that just changed it to 0.05 because we're sitting right now in active class none, which you can see in your view bar. And also if you clicked in your navigation palette, there's a checkbox next to the active class. So we want to select one of our medium lines instead at this point. So go up to your view bar where it says active class, click. You want to click on drafting, scroll down and find pen, and find medium. Now we're going to draw a 4-foot by 8-foot rectangle. So I'm going to start drawing. So I want my X to be 8 foot and my Y to be -4. I'm going to click. And I'm just going to move it over and lock it to my origin point. Next, swap your active class to medium hatch. Grab your rectangle tool, and you need to make a 4x4 foot rectangle. Again, choose whatever method you would like. I'm using the tab method in this case. And you can see that because we changed our class, active class, it automatically styled this square the way that we wanted to. If you make a mistake or you've already drawn the square and you want to change its class, go over into Object Info, and there's a drop-down menu where it says class. So here, for example, I could change it back to medium, and you can see because it was drawn with class style for all the different attributes, it automatically changed it back to match that class. So I'm going to change it back to medium hatch. Next, we're going to swap to medium dash. And we're going to grab our circle tool, which is shortcut key 6. And I'm going to line it up, snapping points with center and center. You can see that by hovering over both of them, I end up actually forming the intersection point with it. So you want your circle selected in the first working mode, which is called radius mode. And I'm going to start drawing it out. And you want a radius length of 2 foot. Enter. You can see it'll automatically lock it into place. And I click to form the circle, and we get a circle with a dashed line going around it that has a 2-foot radius and a 4-foot diameter. And last but not least, we're going to draw a little bit of a polygon. Go ahead and select the polyline tool. The way this works is in this corner vertex mode, we're just going to be drawing lines. I'm going to swap my pen back to medium, my class is back to medium, and I'm going to draw a 5-sided object. You just draw a 5-sided object as well. It doesn't matter really what the shape is. When you're getting to your last line, if you wanted to reconnect, you're going to take your mouse over and hover over where you began. You're going to click once, and it's going to form it into a full polygon that is filled and solid. This polygon, go over to your fill color and pick whatever color you would like. I'm going to pick this cyan. I'm just going to move it over a little bit. So this is what you should be generating. You need to be generating this 4 foot by 8 foot rectangle that's solid. This 4 foot by 4 foot, which is solid lined and hatched. This dashed circle that is a 4 foot diameter and a 2 foot radius, and a 5-sided polygon in some configuration that has a color to it. And lastly, we're going to be taking this lovely design layer and our lovely scenic design that we've done and set it up for publication. So we're going to be using the third style of organization, which is called a sheet layer. Over here in your navigation palette, you're going to click on the third tab, which you can see is called sheet layers. Now there's nothing there at the moment. We're going to make a new one. You can do this one of two ways. You can either right click and say new, or if you go up to your view bar, you can click where it says design layer and say new sheet layer. Either one will get you to the same dialog box. It's going to ask you for a number. You can also import it from another document if you want. No need to do that right now. For sheet title, we're going to be making 3 different sizes of paper to use and making those 3 defaults for us. So I'm going to title this after the first one. So I'm going to make a 12 by 18 piece of paper. Checkbox edit properties after creation and say OK. And then under page setup, you want to change your printable area to be 18 by 12, or also known as US Arch B paper. And hit OK. And we're going to hit OK. So now we're greeted with what looks like another blank document. This is a sheet layer. Sheet layers are used for presenting our information. So we draw with classes on design layers to make our objects, and then we're going to lay them out and present them on sheet layers. We're going to take a look at how you do that. So the first thing we want to do, though, is we want to create a border around this piece of paper. So borders have a very practical use to them in addition to an aesthetic use. So we're going to start by going to our extra heavy class, and I'm going to select rectangle, and I'm going to draw across and snap to the page. So you see it started and it built a filled box. That's ultimately not what we want, so I'm going to change the style to none on the fill. So now we have this thick border going around the outside of the paper. The point of this border is this. If you are reproducing a drafting, or if you're receiving a drafting, you want to make sure that you have all of the information. So the border is what tells us that we have the complete document, that it isn't accidentally cropped in the wrong way, that it isn't, we only received a small subsection of it. This is letting us know that we received the full document, and we have it to work from, and we can trust that it's in things like the right scale that it says it is. Next thing we're going to do is go back up into our resource manager, and we're going to insert our title block. Drag it over. Because we established that insertion point on the bottom right, I'm just going to lock it into place. First click is going to set its position of the insertion tool. The second click is going to set the rotation. If you don't move your mouse, odds are it's going to stay completely vertical. If in doubt though, hit the shift key and work your way back around. That's shift key on rotation is what snaps you to different angles. So I'm going to press and hold shift till it's vertical and lock it into place. So now we have our title block going up our sheet of paper. We next need to edit its information. So in this case, we want this show title. And for all your projects moving forward, you want the show title to be the project name. We want the plate title to be what is actually on the plate. And then you want to edit the information like drawn date and your name and all that stuff as needed. If I try to edit it, you'll see like, if I try to click on it, like I was clicking on my text tool, right? It's not selecting any text. I'm going to hit escape to get out of it. The way you then edit this group is you can double click and it's going to take you straight into the group. And then this becomes where you can edit it. So then this functions the same way it did before. We were just adding text, so I double clicked. Got it? So I'm going to call this project 4. And I'm going to call this plate title 12 by 18. Once you're done, you're going to hit exit group, and there it is. Other thing we want to do real quick is we will end up with 3 sheet layers. Go ahead and change your 1 to 1 of 3. And I'm going to fit back to page area in this case. We're going to create a new sheet layer. This one we're going to call 18 by 24. Edit properties, page setup with the 24 and a height of 18. I'm going to hit OK and OK. Notice that it leaves you still selected on sheet 1, so you have to either check the box next to sheet 2 or up here back in the view bar. If you click drop down, you can select sheet 2 from there. Fit to page area. I'm going to draw my border again. Change the fill to none. And I'm going to insert my title block. To edit it, same deal. Project 4. 18 by 24. Enter. And now we want to change this plate to be 2 and this of to be 3. And exit group. New title block, or new sheet layer rather. And we're going to call this 24 by 36. Page setup. Our 24 by 36 RGD is still the same as our defaults, so we can say OK and OK. Select rectangle 4. Turn the class style to none there. Rectangle round. Insert title block. Project 4. 24 by 36. Now I'm going to change this to 3 of 3. Last thing we're going to look at is something that is called viewports. So that's how we actually get design sheet layer stuff onto these sheet layers. We can design layer stuff onto sheet layers. So it clicks back onto design layer in navigation. You could also get it by, if you're on sheet layer up here, you can click and go down, hit design layer off your view bar, it'll get you to the same place. So we have our objects right here that we need to now port over to being on a sheet layer. We're going to go to View and create viewport. It's going to ask us general settings. It's going to ask you what layer do you want to create it on. You can create it on a new sheet layer from here if you wanted to. In this case, we want to add it to our 12 by 18 one. I tend to choose not to make a drawing label with it. However, you could, especially if you're having multiple different things detailed out on a single page, creating a drawing label and then titling it here can actually be a great organization technique. It's just something to be aware of. Scale, we want it to still be in the 1/2 inch scale, and you can leave everything else default and hit OK. So now we have this sort of funky but accurate representation of all of our shapes. You can tell that there's no edit behavior there, right? Like you can't, this is how a viewport is. A viewport you can think of as sort of a live camera feed back to your design layer. So this is really all about layout. You can move this around, you can place it wherever you need to on the page, and it's going to be where you want it to be. However, if you wanted to alter the drawing in some way, right, then we need to do that back in the design layer. So just as an example of this live update, I'm going to change the color of my 4x8 rectangle just so you can see this. So I'm going to change it to green. When I go back to my sheet 1, that rectangle is now green. So any adjustments you make on your design layers are going to automatically update through the viewport onto your sheet layers. So you draw on design layers with classes, and then you take a viewport, which is a live camera-ish feed of your drawing, and you place that on your sheet layers, which are the pieces of paper that you will be printing. White. So this is what you're doing for this project 4. You should have these objects viewported onto this sheet layer, and then you should have sheets 2 and 3 that are made in the correct sizes with their title blocks. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to dimension these objects. We can do this 2 ways. We can do it in the design layer, which is really helpful for when you're working with lighting fixtures, but it's bad practice when you're working with scenery. The reason being is you may need to use this drawing multiple different times on multiple sheet layers and things like that, and you may not necessarily want your dimensions popping out over top of it. So I'm going to double click on the viewport, and we get an option that's called annotations. I'm going to hit OK. Annotations is sort of like this extra layer on top of sheet layers that allows you to annotate or add in things onto these objects from your design layer. But they will not appear in your design layer, and they will only appear in this one instance of this viewport. So I'm going to hit the constrained line tool. I'm going to click from the top left, top right. You pull up, so it's click, and then click, and a third click to lock it into place. We're going to do the same thing for the side. You'll actually see that it auto-populates with the dimension class. That's just a fancy thing that Vectorworks does. It knows that there's a dimension, and it just goes ahead and puts it in its own class for you. Constrain linear dimension tool again. Click, click, click. And then we have our 4 feet. You can see that it's lining up, it's snapping to all these objects. Click, click, click. And now we want to do a different dimension tool for the circle. So we're going to go up to the radial dimension tool instead. And we can either measure by diameter or we can measure by radius. In this case, we're going to select radius. You're going to click once on the object, and you're going to click a second time when it intersects with the outside of the circle, and you can see that it populates that with that radius at 2 foot. And then for things like oblong-shaped polygons and things like that, where maybe not every measurement is going to be the same, and they're certainly not going to be at parallel angles and things like that, right angles, we need to use what's called the unconstrained linear dimension tool. We're going to click and click. See, mine ended up with some funky measurements, but you get the idea. And you're going to exit the viewport annotation when you're done, and you will have all of your objects fully dimensioned on this sheet layer. And that's your final deliverable.